Because of what God has done through Junction, I have fellowship,
I have identity,
accountability,
abundant growth,
purpose,
I am challenged,
love,
encouraged,
empowered.
Where two or more join together, a junction is formed. That is what happens on Thursday nights when young single adults from across the Brazos Valley join together to worship God, study His Word, and learn how God can use them to impact their world. This isn't a new idea. God has always used His people from all different backgrounds to impact the world around them while transforming their very lives through His grace. God continues His work through Junction, where men and women are finding victory and freedom from long-standing struggles and realizing their identity and significance in the unshakable life given to us in Jesus Christ. Are we perfect? No. We come from a variety of backgrounds and carry a variety of struggles. At times, we all get distracted and stumble. But when those times arrive, it is vital to have a community of men and women reminding us of God's grace and encouraging us to live in pursuit of greater things. You are invited to be part of this community where you are welcomed, wanted, and known.
I am welcomed, wanted, and known.
Welcomed, wanted, and known.
welcome, wanted, and known. I am welcome, wanted,
And known.
Welcomed.
Wanted and known.
I am welcomed, wanted, and known.
Hey, y'all can grab a seat, and man, you know it's the last summer Junction. I know it is sad, but Junction doesn't end. There's still Junction activities galore that happen throughout the month of August, and then we're right back up, and you'll never know that we took a little break here. It's interesting that we're in this series called Clarity, and last week, if you remember, I told the story just really briefly that I was a youth director in England, and to a bunch of expat kids, a bunch of Americans who were there, and they started picking on me after a while because of how I was dressed, because I looked very American, and I was just being what I was. And because I said, who's the American in the room? And I said, well, you know, we all are. I'm just the only one who's willing to be what I am, as opposed to everybody else who's just posing and looking to blend in. And so we talked about a lot of different things, but I was thinking about that a little bit more. That Americanness, when I was in the UK, it impacted not just what I wore, but it impacted how I spoke. It impacted what I ate. Like when we went into pubs, I wasn't sitting there saying every time, let me eat the British dish. I'm like, where's the burger? That's what I'm looking for. Fish and chips is fine, but give me McDonald's. Not really, I didn't go for McDonald's, but my appetites, they just remain the same. Every area of my life was influenced by who I was and who I am, which is an American. Well, I was thinking about today, and one of the places in the UK that people love to visit is Trafalgar Square. Has anybody been to the UK, been to Trafalgar Square, climbed the lions? A few, one or two? Good. This is going to be very helpful then. Okay, so in Trafalgar Square, this building is called the National Gallery, and this is where you can go for free. There's a suggested donation, but you don't have to give it if you don't want to. You can just walk right by and go in, and you can see all these incredible works of art. I think there's like 3,400 pieces of art that you can go and look at if that's your jam. That was not my jam, but when people would come to visit me, this is one of the places they wanted to go, and so I went in on a day off, and I just kind of wandered around. I said, these are the pieces that I like, that I think are important, and so I would single them out and would read a few things about them. Like if you come, you definitely have to see Van Gogh. You got to see the sunflowers. You definitely got to see some Monet, some Picasso. That's amazing. And then I don't even know how you say that guy who paints with the dots and stuff like that. But what is it? I always call it sewer rat. I know that's not what it is, but that's how I remember how to spell it. And then there's this painting is incredible. This one right here, it's gruesome, but it's incredible. It's one of the few paintings I've ever walked into and been like, oh my goodness, it stopped me in my track. It's as tall as what this whole ceiling is, from floor, not stage floor, but down here, floor up, and as wide, if not a little bit wider than the screen. So it's massive. And when you come in, when you look at her dress, it's like you're looking at a photograph. I was just amazed at how real it was. And it's the beheading of Lady Jane, I think is what it is. And it recounts the story. It's a really sad story, but it's a beautiful painting. Basically, she was being executed because she was trying to claim the throne, which wasn't rightfully hers, but it was a dirty uncle who just kind of, anyway. But there's a penalty for trying to do that, high treason. And it's off with your head. And so because she was royalty, though, it was in a private chamber. It wasn't a way for the masses to see. And so it came time, and they brought her in, blindfolded her, and let her in by the hand, and said, okay, my lady, you need to kneel. And so she kneeled, and now we need you to lean forward to put your head on the chopping block. I mean, can you just imagine, like, willfully doing this? And so she leans forward, and they say, oh, my goodness. And so this is what it's capturing. He comes up and he says, "Milady, we're so sorry. We had you kneel a few steps too soon. The chopping block is still ahead." And so she has to crawl, blindfolded on the ground, grabbing a hold of the chopping block to eventually lay her head on to be beheaded. Horrible story. Beautiful, beautiful painting. So it's on my list. It's obviously like, God, this is a killjoy, Todd. So, and then the last one, it's called The Ambassadors. It's a little bit hard to see here, but these guys were like, we're so bright, we're so smart, and so all the areas that we have accomplished, we want them to be included in this painting. And oh, by the way, we're going to paint this with this skull. You can kind of see it's weird, but as you come and you walk in front of the painting real close, it becomes full-on looking at a skull. It doesn't look like it's off to the side. And like, how do they do that without computers? You know, how do they do that just by painting? It's incredible. And so this was the tour. Like, if you came in, I can get you in and out of the National Gallery in about 10 to 12 minutes. So if that's not your jam, here it is. And so I'm going to help you, okay? I'm going to give you the directions. Here's the floor plan of the National Gallery, okay? The red dot, that's the entrance. You come in, the lions, they're down here. Like, the lions are here and the fountains. But you come up and you come into the door, and you're like, okay, it is time to go. And it's confusing, but I let people know there's so many other things to see in London. Let's just knock this out so you can say you've been there and you saw Picasso and all the wonderful stuff. So you come in and you hang a right, go up some stairs, and then there are the sunflowers. Like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I know it is, but we got to keep time, you know? And so then you turn around and you walk back and there's Monet. You're like, yes! And now many people, they're not paying attention. There's this little secret room here that they often miss, and that's where Picasso is. And so you have to go in and hit Picasso. And then from there, you hop back out and you go through 2 rooms, and there's Sewer Rat and his little dots. And it's really pretty amazing. Also, interesting, if you see this painting, he painted the scenery at one time, and then he brought the people in one at a time at different parts of the day, so their shadows actually are different in the painting, which is amazing. But he's painting all with dots, and that's really cool. Hurry up, we got to go, go, go. And then you come in, and like this, it just leaves you breathless. Like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And it's so convenient. They're all in this one little area, except for those blasted ambassadors. You have to hightail it up. And it's better to go this way, to fight back. Everybody's looking for this good stuff here, but nobody's really caring about the areas where you're going. And it's better not to continue and weave through here, because there's some other stuff that people want to see. So you come back down some steps, up some steps, weave through, come down, get to the side, and then you need to exit. And so you walk in front, and you're like, this is really neat. Oh, wow, it's full. And then you're out. 10 to 12 minutes. It's incredible. So if you're there, feel free to take a picture, but let me tell you, they're tricky. They move the paintings around. My tour now will take you at least 20 minutes, unless they've rearranged them yet again. They moved the lady way in the back, and they just spread out all these pieces, so you have to explore more. But this is what we've done with Colossians. Our clarity series has been through the book of Colossians, and we've just done just a quick, weird tour all the way through. And so if you're like, yeah, we sucked every little morsel out of this book, we haven't. There's a whole bunch more in there. I mean, we stopped and we said, hey, here's the overview of the book of Colossians. I've gone through. I'm like, I'm going to change some of this stuff, so don't take a picture of it. It's going to change. And then as you come through, we talked about prayer, about Paul's prayer and the incredible prayer that he prayed, and this was just a diagram, but we sprinted through. We got to keep going, and we had all these isms we began to talk about, like this is what Paul is writing against, and people's thoughts, the impact of it, and the response that he has. He just writes about who this Jesus is, who is higher and greater and more amazing than what the world has ever seen. I love the book of Colossians because, man, you get into it and you begin to read about who Jesus is. You can't help but be dumbfounded. You can't help but be dumbfounded by who he is. Turn to the Gospels and you're reading the Gospels. You can't help, if you just really stop and you really read and you understand that there was a man named Jesus who all of these crazy things happened around, it's going to blow your mind. And it's going to just be captivating. But many of us, we're just like, oh, whatever. But Paul doesn't let us do that. But we buzz through that. And remember last week we talked about this whole, in chapter 3, that it was like keep seeking, this continual seeking. But that was really talking about the desires, the passions of our heart, that is to be the seeking Christ above, the things above where Christ is seated, that we're to have a passion for it. We're to set our minds upon it. And as we do that towards the things above, we started looking, there's actual change that happens in our life. When we have our minds set on things above and we're living who we are, we're living as an American in England. When that happens, there's some things that we abandon. There's some lifestyle things that we put away. And there's other ones that we put on. And now, it's important to get the order right because many times people just want to take off and put on and think that's what Christianity is. But no, it starts back with the heart and the mind. Remember, we talked about that. It has to be transformed. We're born ruined. No hope, separated from God. We don't know Jesus. We know there's brokenness. We see it in the world all the way around us. But, man, we don't know what to do. And so we try all sorts of things, whether it's a pursuit of education, pursuit of money, pursuit of sex, pursuit of drinking, whatever it may be that we're running after, trying to fill the brokenness, but we know that doesn't work. Jesus does. And that's why God sent his son. It says, whoever believes in me will not perish but have eternal life. And so it's about belief. And when we believe, that transformation happens. And that transformation, when we set our minds on things above, when we unleash what he has worked in, that's where the don'ts and the do's come in. They come on that end, not the front end. It's by grace and grace alone that you've been saved. The gospel is incredibly simple, incredibly powerful, and a lot of times we make it incredibly challenging. We make it something that is not. And last week, we talked about some do's and some don'ts, but it's not from do's to don'ts. It's the outpouring of your passions. And we got into that basically the individual and the church. We didn't get to the family. We didn't get to work. We didn't get to the world around us, and that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to try to clean up quickly. It's the National Gallery Todd Berkey tour of the book of Colossians. So if you have your Bible, you're going to be in Colossians. And I said we were going to be in chapter 4 today, which we will get to 4, but we're going to back up and we're going to hit chapter 3, verse 18. And we're going to go through chapter 4, verse 6. And let's do this. I've liked that we've done this the last couple of weeks. I'm going to give you not much time, maybe like 4 minutes. So you need to, right now, those of you who've been here before, you know what I'm getting ready to do. Somebody at your table is going to read. So make sure you've made eye contact. Who's going to read the text at your table? We're going Colossians chapter 3, verse 18 through chapter 4, verse 6. I'm going to give you about 4 minutes. Ready, set, go. Read it at your tables. Okay, all right. So we're just going to 4-6. Table 3 is being overachievers going beyond 4-6. I see what's happening there. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, just really quick, just so you know, that this can sometimes frustrate people. When the book of Colossians was written, when Paul was writing, he didn't put the numbers there, okay? He didn't drop the chapter divides. He didn't put the verse divides. And this is one of the absolute worst chapter divides ever. Did you notice that? I mean, like he's in the mid-sentence and it goes from the end of 3 to 4. And you're like, wait a second, that's the same. What are you doing? How dare you? So the chapter divides are not inspired, just so you know. And it's always wise when you're reading the text, if somebody says, just turn to verse 24, it's probably wise to back up a few verses and also to continue to read a little bit to make sure you get context right. But what we're going to do is we're going to hit 4 things. And I'm going to tell you right now, 3 and 4 we're going to fly through. Okay, we're just going to fly through them. Number 1 is we're going to spend the bulk of our time. And then we're going to get to 2 and we'll go from there. But we're going to talk about family. Okay, we're talking about these family relations. And part of me, I sat there and there was like, hey, since it's such a rush through the National Gallery, we can skip Rembrandt, you know? And so I thought about like, well, let's just skip this area because sometimes it really offends some people when we talk about wives and husbands' relationships. And, you know, you start talking about children and obedience. And really, there's only probably one in our room right now who would have any issues with that. But, you know, but we need to look at it really quick. And we're going to look at it quick. So if you're sitting there and you have a lot more questions, that's fine. I'd be happy to dialogue with it. But I want you to notice this. If you didn't see it, there's 3 relational pairings that are there. You have marriage, you have wives and husbands. And then you have parents, you have children and parents. And work, you have slaves and masters. And I don't know, just a quick observation as you look here, these 3 pairings, do you notice that the leader of each of those relationships is mentioned second? I mean, do you see that right away we see this concept of servant leadership, this idea that to lead is to serve, is to put others first? I mean, it's really kind of a cool thing here. That's just a freebie. But when you're reading through and studying God's Word, when you see these pairings, these relationships, and really, if we just stop for a moment, what you believe, your faith, is most clearly seen through relationships. I mean, and it's probably most clearly seen through a lot of these relationships because that's who you spend the most time with. And so the reality of who you are comes out with those who know you best. And so how we act and interact in these things, it really begins to reveal more and more the conditions of our heart. That doesn't mean when you make a mistake and you freak out and you're not very kind to somebody, it doesn't mean that you're not saved. It just means, man, you're not acting probably out of that new creation self at that moment. But we've got these three things, so let's just go through them briefly. The first one, we start off really, wives, be subject to your husband. Be subject to your husband, plural, as is fitting in the Lord. And so I just want us to look at that word there. It's very interesting. It's written in the middle voice in Greek, and what that basically means is this is a choice. It doesn't mean that you were forced. It means it is a choice. You choose to say, okay, I trust you. You yield. And it's displayed there through their actions, how people behave. And I think about this, and I know not many of us in this room, if any, are married right now, but someday maybe you will be. And it's important to kind of work through these things. Like, is this if you're a female looking for a hottie, is this a male that I'm willing to follow? Is this somebody who I'm willing to trust? Is this somebody that I'm willing to be yoked with the rest of my life? If you're a male, we'll get to you in a moment. But this is how it works out. A prime example here, and I don't remember, Aaron, it was not even a year ago, right? It's an airplane and a wedding. So I don't remember. It was not quite a year, about a year ago, I guess. And we had some family members who were getting married, and Erin is 100% about experiences. She loves experiences, doesn't want to miss experience. She is fine. Like, I don't want to spend money on anything else, but if there's an experience, like, woo, come on. Now, I'm not always wired the same way, and so as you can tell when there's differences, that's usually when there's maybe some tension, right? Maybe some friction. And so when this wedding announcement came in, Aaron's like, I want us all to go. A whole family, we're going to fly out. It's going to be work. It's perfect. I look at the calendar. We can make this work. And so we start talking about it. But 4 flights cost a lot of money. You know, hotels and renting cars cost a lot of money. And so as we just began to look at our schedule, and we look at our finances, and began to look at just the rest of the traveling and things that we want to do, the rest of the experiences that we wanted to do, we started having this dialogue. And so Aaron comes like, okay, I think we can do it for like $3,000. I'm like, I don't think we can do it. I just don't think so. Oh, and so she runs back and she's, I found a new flight. And so back and forth we went for a while, and eventually we just kind of reached this place, and I said, you know what, I wish we could all be there. I really do wish we could all be there. And I do think it's important for one of us from our family to be there to represent our family, to support them because they're family. And I know it's not what you want, but I think that's kind of the best thing for us. And as we dialogued about that wasn't probably Erin's number one choice. But at that moment, what went through her mind, and she can verify this, is like, okay, well, Todd is not a tyrant, and he's not sitting here trying to deny me of anything and everything in life, and I trust him, and I trust his leadership. I've seen him serve in other ways, and I believe him that this is probably the best decision for our family. And so, okay. And it was amazing to me because as a husband, when we have, and there's so few, really, I'm so blessed. There are so few times when Aaron and I, like we see something and we're like, okay, we end up on different pages. And always when we end up on different pages, it's because of that internal wiring of experiences or like new electronics, you know? And so we end up on different places, and that's where tension comes, but that's where it's good to have great communication. And so there's sometimes I'm sitting there like, man, I think we should do this. She's like, really? We have this at work. So I'm like, you know what? You're right. And so this isn't just like male dominance in a marriage. This isn't like, oh, well, I say it will be. That's not at all what's saying here. It's she chose to not only just book a ticket and fly out, but she also chose not to walk around going, oh, you want some food? I bet you would think it's great. I only made one meal tonight. One ticket, one meal. You know, she didn't do that. She chose to go ahead and say, I trust and I'm not going to hold anything against you. And I love you. I'm going to continue in this incredible relationship. And that's those moments, the few when they've happened, I tell you, it's the time that I feel the most loved because I know it's a huge sacrifice. And there's never been a time when that's happened and ask her about. There's never been a time when she's like, okay. And I go, boom, got my way. Because I love my wife, and I know that she's hurting in that. And so I know it's a hard decision, and so there's a part of me that's mourning with her because I would like for all of us to go as well. But that's what he's talking about here. This is not like, you have to or you're a bad, horrible person and you're, doom on you. He's saying, be subject. It's your choice. But if you have your hearts and your minds set on God, this is the role that I have for you in a marriage setting. And that would tell me, choose wisely. Choose wisely. And I was thinking about this as well because I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. This is not an issue of value. It's not an issue of talent or intelligence or ability or importance. It's not saying that Aaron is less than me. That's really foolish because a lot of times we read that word, right? We read that word, to be subject. You go to Ephesians, to submit. No. When we read those words, we have such negative connotations. We think, that means lesser than, weaker than. I have one question for you, okay? Before we start getting all mad and wanting to fight and yell, not that anybody wants to do that, but if that's in you, I have just one question for you. And here it is. Tell me, who is more fully God? Is it God the Father? Is it God the Son? Or is it God the Spirit? Which one of those three is most God? Which one of these is most valuable? Which one of these three is the most important? And your answer, well, they're all equal. Then why in the world did the Son, so many times when you read in the book of John, he sits there and says, I don't say a word except for what I hear the Father say. I don't make a judgment except what the Father judges. I don't do anything. I don't say anything except for what he tells me to. And he comes to the cross, right? He's sitting there. He's like, Father, I don't want to do this. This is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. Yet nevertheless, not my will, your will be done. He submitted. He subjected himself underneath the Father's authority. Did that mean he was less God? No. And so many times when we start having these little irritability things, a lot of the times it's because we're thinking maybe through an incorrect context. There's nothing to do with value. There's nothing to do with intelligence. There's nothing to do with ability. Man, Erin dominates me in all of those areas. She's more gifted in so many more ways than I am. And here's where I am a little bit smart. I understand that. And so I sit there and say, how can I empower? How do I say, yes, please, I need your help. Would you show me how to do this? Would you show me the best way for our family to move forward over here? Like, help me learn. And that requires some humility on my part too, but that's what servant leadership is really all about. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things. And so Paul is saying, and remember, we got to put it in context, because this is 3:18, chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Remember what they were. He wanted you to keep seeking with your heart the things above. He wanted you to set your mind on the things above where Christ is seated. Why? He wants you to look at Christ. What does Christ do? Well, Christ, we see him submitting to the Father. Joyfully. Willingly. Not easy at times, but willing to do that. And so Erin, as she sits there and she says, this is a way for me not just to only love Todd, but it's a way for me to love and honor God. When we're sitting there saying, I'll get one airplane ticket, and we'll bunk with another family member who's going out. We'll split the car cost, and do it all without, and all of that, the world would say, oh, she's doing that for you. And like, no. She's doing it as unto the Lord. And he's going, oh, this is great. Oh, my daughter, that's awesome. And then you wonder why she knows God in such an incredible way. You wonder why when she talks about who he is, that there's such zeal and passion. You wonder when you talk and hear her story why there's hope, even in the darkest times. It's because this is a woman who absolutely puts Christ above all else, who has her heart and her mind set on the things above, and is willing at times to be uncomfortable for his glory. And what she finds is there's this awesome intimacy between her and him that nothing can shake. And that's what Paul is inviting the wives of this congregation into. Now, again, most of us in this room are not wives. But if you're in a dating relationship and you're moving forward and you're thinking, I'm going to step into marriage someday, keep this in mind. Just keep it in mind. Is this somebody, do I see signs that they are constantly loving? Well, let's just see what they should see, right? Let's just get there. Husbands, love your wives and do not be embittered against them. Now, this is incredible. There's a little bit longer section in Ephesians for both husbands and wives. And so usually people, when they're studying Colossians, they also study Ephesians. Or when they're studying Ephesians, they also study Colossians side by side. But it's very interesting here. The word love comes from agape. And that means we're to love like Christ's love for the church. That's what Ephesians tells us. So husbands, your job is to love your spouse as Christ loved the church, who he laid his life down for her. He never owned property. He didn't care if he had a high reputation or not. He didn't care what the public thought about him or not. He was a man on a mission who, when he was tired, he served. When he was pulling his disciples away because they were all tired and they just needed a rest, and he pulls them aside. If you guys remember this, they're together, and then all the people find them. They all run ahead to go and say, "Ha ha! We knew where you were going! Surprise!" And there's thousands of them, and he's like, "Well, let's teach them. Let's teach, and now they need something to eat. Let's feed them." When he's tired and exhausted because of the love for the church, he's willing to sacrificially give of himself. Men, if you're to become a husband, this is what God is asking of you. Now, here's the thing that's really interesting. In other ancient Near East texts, there are things about rules of the household, of what the expectations are of wives and what are the expectations of husbands. Never, zero, zippo, that's not even a word, zippo, nil, nada, is the husband to agape his wife. Never. This is unheard of in the day. This is like the standard was you need to at least give some food and some shelter and protection, and that's it. You don't need to give attention. You don't really need to care for her emotional needs. That's not really required of you. What's required of you is just to provide those minimal things. That's it. That's the social norm. The bar is very, very low. And many of you are like, well, I just don't like that. That's not how the world works today. Okay, correct, but that's how the world worked then. And so when Paul is writing these words, these are radical. This is something that is like, wait, what? There is not another group of people that is being called to love their wives at this standard anywhere. And this is incredible. So the women's role, actually what's being called to, that's the social norm. Man's role, that is not the social norm. It is above and beyond. And you're going to see that same theme hit here with parents, and you're going to see the same thing happen with masters and slaves or managers and those who work for them. Every person who's in that leadership role that we all want is called to go far above and beyond what the social norms are as a follower of Christ. Exciting, isn't it? You know, so many times, and I remember in college, man, talking with some other guys like, oh yeah, women's submission is going to be awesome. Like, give me some beer. You know, go get me this. I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea what's being called and asked of you. And I tell you, women, if you find a man who is willing to sit there and say, like, I own that, I step into it, I know I can't, but Christ can through me. We're going to get to that here in just a moment. But I'm willing to accept that. And here's the social thing, the social norm, and what's acceptable, what's minimum. And here's even what's like gets me like 4 stars. And here's even what gets me a gold medal. But these are the standards of the world, and that's not the standard that I'm being measured by. That's the standard that I'm being called to. What I'm being called to, that new creation self, is way up here. And when you find somebody who is like, that's it, and you all are both into each other, it makes it really easy to say, one airline ticket, okay. And when you're a husband who's lucky enough to find somebody like Erin, and you sit there like, man, I really want this new thing. And she says, you know, you already have like 4 of those working devices already. Do you need another one? And you're like, oh, you're right. And I want to be mad, but what was the second part of the verse? Was not to be embittered against them, right? And I really think that's the other part of this, too, for the husbands that's being called is, so you're selflessly serving. That's what you're called to do, sacrificially serving. So there are times maybe you're going without so others can go with. And never is it to enter your mind of, if she just wasn't here, think of all the things I could have. If she just didn't want to travel so much, think of the things that I could do. If she just wouldn't speak up, I'd have like 7 iPhones, one for each day of the week. I could drive whatever car. Not to even have a hint of that bitterness begin to grow. And that's impossible on our own. But here's the beauty. Remember, we've been changed. And that new creation self, that new heart, boom, boom, that beats for Jesus, and that mind that's set upon, that renewed mind, that's what it longs for. And there is a battle that goes on, but it longs to behave in this way. It's truly, truly incredible. Well, let's go to the next pairing here. I spent way too long there, so now I got to go even faster. Like we just stopped at the sunflowers. It's time to get to Monet. Okay. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things. My kids are at camp, so we'll have to watch this section, kids, okay? Children, be obedient to your parents in all things. For this is well-pleasing to the Lord. And this is so cool. I do tell my kids this, and they don't buy it, but I think this is the coolest thing. First off, the word obedient here, you need to know this. It is a far stronger word than that word to be subject to. Far stronger. The one is, because of its tense, is it's a choice. This is, do it. There's no option in the middle of this. And so woo! But here's the beauty. Here it is, because it's pleasing to the Lord. And so even as a 5-year-old, when mom or dad says, hey, would you take your plate to the sink? Yes, mommy, yes, daddy, and gets up and go. They're being obedient. And that moment, they are just glorifying God in an incredible way. The heavens are rejoicing. They have an ability to praise God, to worship, if you will, as a 5-year-old in incredible ways. Even as they grow, and it's time to get off the computer, Fortnite time is over, and they don't throw a fit. In that small thing, God is glorified. And we're designed to glorify God. We're designed to image God. And it's amazing to me that the King of Kings and Lord of Lords would provide ways for even the smallest and most vulnerable to still honor him. That's incredible. To me, that's incredible. Now, it comes on to the leaders. Now, it's fathers, and so that's where moms are like, yeah. Do not exasperate your children so they will not lose heart. Again, this is not normal. That was not the social norm. Didn't care about the children. Children and women really didn't have a whole lot of rights, and it was just tough. Too bad. You don't like what it is? Go out. Do your own thing. You want to go do your own thing? There are no jobs for you. You're going to be defenseless. You're not going to have any food, no provision. You're going to starve to death, and you'll probably be killed by somebody just passing by just for fun, for kicks and giggles. Have fun with that if you want to leave my house. So pick up your clothes and put it in the dirty laundry. There's no concept of, man, I'm really pressing in hard on this child. And their spirit's getting crushed. I need to make sure I'm walking alongside it and building up as well. Doesn't mean I give them a free pass, but it doesn't mean every conversation I have is you stink at this, you stink at this, you stink at this, you stink at this, you stink at this. This is what it's called fathers to do, but it's interesting the word father, it's not actually just linked to the men. It's actually for the immediate biological ancestor, which is either parent. And so really that command falls on both mom and dad. So moms also, but usually oftentimes moms do a better job of being okay of you fell down and whereas dad's why are you getting blood on my pants? That's just, sometimes that's what dads do. And I think about, before we move on to the next thing, I think about if all families operated this way. Can you imagine? Some of you can, most of you probably can't. If you grew up in a home where your mom and dad stayed together, and didn't just stay together, but your dad was an incredible servant leader who elevated his wife, and everybody knew that she's the apple of his eye, and that he defended, and he was always invested in her and always pursuing her and looking to serve her. And that she as well would turn around, and like if there ever were just a little bit of tension, that she was willing to yield and then not hold a grudge and not come and talk to you like, you know what your father did? And like, many of you have never seen that modeled because we live in a broken world. But can you imagine how different life would be if you saw that modeled? And can you imagine if your parents, you know, when they came to you, they found a right balance between like, no, that's wrong, but man, you're doing a good job over here. That they were looking to build up at times and still not just letting you get away with everything, but they found a nice balance. Some of us have never tasted that. And so that brokenness, that it just manifests and it impacts us in this world today. I mean, we grow up and now we've got all this extra baggage because mom and dad, they didn't function well together in their marriage, and they didn't function well as a parenting unit. And now we're like, oh, we've got all this junk in us, all because of the brokenness that we see. And some of us, we sit there and we know it. We see it in our lives. And so I just want to encourage you in a few different things. One is that you're a brand new creation in Christ. The old is gone. It doesn't mean that those memories and those effects are just easily eradicated, but you are a new and incredible creation in Christ who is wildly loved and wildly forgiven. You just need to know that. You also need to know that all throughout Scripture, you're given constant models of what this looks like. And so if you're sitting there and go, I've never seen it modeled what it is to be a man of God. Well, there's a guy named Jesus who had modeled it really, really well. And there are people around this community who would love to walk with you to help you better understand what is it to honor and image God as a man. And there are women all throughout the Bible who know and can be seen to see what does it look like to honor God as a wife. If you've never seen it, they're within Scripture, but there are women within this community as well who can be introduced to you, or you can walk with, and you guys can begin to explore these things together and just be in awe of what it is supposed to be, what marriage is supposed to be. Not according to the world, but according to God. And I guarantee you, when you sit there and you just look at what those two little statements, those two sentences, if those things were enacted, can you imagine what marriage would actually look like versus what it looks like today in our world? And it all starts with a new heart and a new mind set on God, and then that naturally releases that way. And so if you've experienced the brokenness of that, man, I'm sorry. And the temptation is then to carry that brokenness with you into the next phase of life and just always be blaming. I had a poor upbringing, so it's all their fault. And that explains for me to continue to behave in this destructive way. And man, as a follower of Christ, there is hope and there is reason for us to go ahead and make these changes because the power of Christ resides within us, which we'll get to here again in a moment. But I just wanted to pause in those two relationships where most of this room have seen nothing but brokenness. There is restoration and healing possible. The cycle does not have to continue. It does not need to. There's liberation and freedom in Christ. But now we come on to this next thing, and as we come into it, it's dealing with slaves and masters, and I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I read my Bible, I have a hard time remembering that this is not written at Abraham Lincoln's time. Like the environment is just different. The slavery that's happening there has nothing really to do with racial divides. It has everything to do with these people lost a war. It has everything to do with, man, I have no money. I need something to somehow to provide for my basic needs, so I will sell myself to somebody else's service. And then all the way throughout, there's this, no matter where you are in the pecking order, there's always that nerve. If we get conquered, I might be in charge of my household, but somebody else may come, overcome our city and our town, take us all captive, and now I may be the servant. And so this idea is just different than what yours and mine is. And it's going to be very interesting. Oh, man, I kind of want to chase it, kind of don't, kind of do, kind of don't, kind of will. Okay. So it's if you're a little bit of a Bible nerd, just think about this. Okay, you got Colossians, the book of Colossians, and he's now talking about slaves. He's going to talk about masters, right? And that's important to know because there is a slave who is sitting there helping to deliver the letter. His name is Onesimus. And Onesimus, he's the center of this other book called Philemon, just before the book of Hebrews. It's a very short book, a great book. So think about this. You're there. The letter comes. We're going to read it. The church gathers around, and they're going to read about what slaves should do. And you've got Onesimus who has brought it. Onesimus, he didn't like what was happening, so he said, peace out. He escaped. He ran as far away as he possibly could, and he bumped into Paul. Paul in Rome, and there he came to know Christ, and Paul says, you got to go back. And Onesimus is like, are you kidding me? Paul, do you understand if I go back, I'm a runaway slave. Do you understand what they can do to me? They can kill me. They can do whatever they want to me. Yeah, I understand. But you need to go back. Paul, have I not been a good servant to you? Have I not been a good brother to you? Oh, you've been excellent. I've been so encouraged by you. And I'll write all about it in the book to Philemon. But you need to go back. And so right here, I think it's really amazing. Paul is so bright in what he's doing. So you're reading the church letter, and it's coming through. And remember, the social norm that this is okay. If you've conquered people in battle and they're there serving in your household, that is okay. And so Paul realizes, man, church doesn't have enough power as a whole to say this is wrong. We're going to push everything out back against it right now, but he's going to work that magic in a very unique way. So he says, I'm not ruffling any feathers. Here's the roles. If you're in those situations, here are the roles that I want you to do. Servants, this is what I want you to do. Masters, this is what I want you to do. And then when you get to Philemon, it's pretty amazing because he's like, oh, man, Philemon, you're such a great guy. You're an awesome man. And, Onesimus, he ran away. I know he wronged you. Anything that he wronged you, I'll cover. And isn't it good to have your brother back? Isn't it great he's my brother. Isn't it good to have your brother back? Not your servant. My hope in sending him to you is not that he would be your servant anymore, but he'd be your brother, that you would elevate him. And that letter got to be read publicly as well. If you can imagine, you're like, oh man, Paul's building me up like, oh yeah, I'm a good giver, and I'm always hospitable, and I'm awesome. Oh, Paul, stop. And Onesimus is here, and he was great for you. Oh yeah, it's great. And you want me to forgive everything that he's done. Yep. That's what Paul asks. Let him go. Whew. Well, Paul, if I do, what will the rest of the people who are serving me in my household do? If I let the very one who ran away off the hook without any punishment and receive him back as a brother, how could I still treat these others as servants in my household? I would have to do that to them as well. To which Paul silently is saying, yep, you got it. And so a lot of times people will sit there and say, well, the Bible is just all for slavery. And it's not. Paul is working within the confines in a very brilliant way to sit there and push back and say, if this is where you find yourself, we want you to serve in these roles. Work for your freedom. And then he sits there and it just blows your mind away with how beautiful it is and like, oh yeah, he ran away, yeah. I think you owe me your very life, don't you, Philemon? Didn't you come to know Christ through me? Haven't I served you well as a father? Haven't I given and invested in you in a lot of ways? And so, but if he owes you anything, charge it to my account. I'm good for it. I'll pay it. I'll stand in his room instead. Whatever he owes, I'll take it. And if you're sitting there and you're a gospel follower, you need to know that is the gospel message. Because we are in debt to God the Father, and Jesus sits there and says, oh, Father, here he is, and I know Todd owes you a lot of stuff, but I got it. I paid it for him. Incredible. The genius of Paul. So just a quick rabbit trail. If you're like, I have no idea what you talked about, I don't even know where Philemon is, then that's fine. Just check out. And if you're like, oh, wow, that was really kind of a tasty morsel, then you're welcome. So that's fine. And if you're somewhere in between, then that's fine too. Slaves, in all things obey. It's the exact same word in Greek. Exact same word as children and slaves and servant. This is who slaves, in all things obey. It's supposed to be those. Great job, Todd. Those who are your masters on earth, not with external service only, as those who merely please men, people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Again, the normal expectation is if you found yourself in this role, it was to obey, to do your job. Doesn't matter if somebody's watching or does not. That's the normal. That's the social, normal expectations. Masters, grant your slaves justice and fairness. No. They're property, possessions. I don't owe them justice. I don't owe them fairness. See, again, Paul, elevating those who have the responsibility, the burden of leadership, are called to such a high standard. And so as you and I, as we sit there, and maybe this is you, maybe it's not, but you have this desire to maybe lead in the church. Now, I just want to let you know, servant leader, when you step into different leadership positions, man, the bar is not what's minimum. You're servant leader, and you're called to a very high standard. Husbands, high standard. couples, and you're like, man, I wish I had a kid. High standard to parent. I want to be boss of my company. High standard to treat your employees, higher than what is around you in the world. And I think there's a couple cool things here. I've got to roll fast. First one, every role provides an opportunity to live as we were created. We were designed to image God. We're designed to honor him in everything. And so every relationship that he just covered is an opportunity to honor God. And so if honoring God, if imaging God is our number one thing that we love to do in life, we were provided an opportunity every single moment when we go to work. Every moment. If we are somebody who has somebody with authority over us, we have an opportunity to image God right then and there. The world may not be watching, but he is. And he's not looking going like, oh, I'm going to get you. He's like, yes, let me celebrate with you. I think that's just an incredible thing. Because so many times we think, I would do the big things for God. And he's like, that's awesome and fine and dandy, but what I'm looking for you to do is image me in the small things. Every day I have an opportunity to bring God great glory, to image him in how I love Aaron. Every day I have an opportunity. And I think that's cool. How cool. Every moment to have an opportunity to love and honor God as I'm designed. I think that's really cool. So we saw this here. You got with marriage, he starts with the wives, be subject, husbands, sacrificial love, no bitterness, children, obey, parents, no exasperation, slaves, obey, masters, be just and fair. And as I think about like this opportunity, think of it back in the garden if you want to. You know, we think of the Garden of Eden and we're like, okay, well, there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's right in the middle of the garden. We think it's like this, but really when you read the text, it's a lot more like this. But then it's like all the other trees all the way around this room and then outside of the room. So there's always options. But for visual sake, with my high-end clip art here, let's just come back so we can see what's going to happen. So let's throw some fruit on that tree. And let's not forget that the other trees have fruit on it as well to eat. And so way back in Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve, they're hanging out in the garden, right? And there was only one thing they weren't supposed to eat of, right? That fruit, tree of knowledge of good and evil. But they could eat of any other trees. And remember that right here, there's just 3, but it would be trees everywhere. And God gave that tree as an opportunity for them to be truly human. Because as image bearers of God, God has choice, and so he gave us choice. So without the opportunity to choose to honor him, we couldn't really be image bearers of God. We'd be robots. But that's not what he designed us to be. And so the tree is actually a blessing. It was meant to be an opportunity. Every time they would walk by the tree, if the tree's right here, and they would walk by and not eat and grab something else, it was an opportunity for them to declare, like, God, you're awesome. And they're functioning as they're designed to do. Every time they walk by, oh, another time, God is like, that's awesome. And they're like, yes, this is what we're designed to do. And they walk by again. Yes, this is what we're designed to do. And so they're walking by, they're living as they're designed to do until they bump into the serpent. And the serpent's like, hey, psh, come here. And they're like, whoa, what's up? And then it's like, hey, have you seen this fruit? If you eat it, it'll make you like God. You'll know right and wrong on your own. You don't even need him anymore. Break the dependence of that. We have that same thing. All you have to do, like for husbands, for example, on here, all you have to do is put on their bitterness and unloving. And every day when I get up, and if I'm tempted to be bitter and hold a grudge against Aaron, as I sit there and think about reaching towards the fruit, and I just want to have it just grow in there, like, oh, how dare you not let me get my 7th iPhone? She hasn't denied me the 7th iPhone, but anyway, if that were the case, if I were reaching to be angry towards her and I stop and I realize, no, this is Aaron, this is my bride, this is the woman that I love that God has given me. No, I reject that. There's no reason to be bitter about her. She was right. Better ways to spend that money. Another plane ticket for the wedding. I mean, this is just great. And as I do that, I now at that moment, I function as I'm designed to image God. Boom! That's exciting. It's like training to win Wimbledon your whole life. Like you sit there and you train and you train and you train and train and you finally have the moment. It's taking you years to get to the moment. And there it is, this match point, and you hit the overhead smash and boom, you win the trophy. And like, this is what I'm designed for. You have that moment every day. I have that moment every day when I choose to not sit there and say, no, I'm not going to let bitterness grow up. When I sit there, if there are people working for me and I say, no, I'm going to treat you with fairness. I'm going to give you fairness. I'm not going to sit there and treat you unfairly. When I'm working for others, I say, you know what, even though you're not watching, I know I can cut a corner here, but instead I'm going to do this to the best of my ability, even though nobody else sees. When I do that, I'm honoring him, and it's my Wimbledon moment. Boom! Yes, this is what I'm designed to do. And the crowd goes wild. It's incredible, but we just see it through our earthly eyes as something so much less than that. I told you the two cool things. Second one is this. Think about this. You've got children, men, women. You've got with the servants, so that means there's conquered people from all over the place. So you got a bunch of different nationalities all hanging out together. You got all different ages hanging out together, and they're all part of the same church. There's diversity all over the place in this church, and that is so cool. The same message. They're all gathered together. There's unity. There's value being given by this letter written. Now, I told you I'd go fast. Now, I told you we're going to do it. Prayer. 4:2 says, devote yourselves to prayer, keeping alert in it with an attitude of thanksgiving. And we're just going to go quickly here. Devote means to attend to constantly, to be busily engaged in. It's a perpetual, ongoing thing. Much like Colossians 3:1. Keep seeking. To perpetually set your mind on the things. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing thing. So to be devoted is continuing to devote yourself. And I was thinking about this, so I asked Erin to send me some pictures. When I asked Erin to marry me, because she's a photographer, I made her a picture book, a photo book. And so I was in Chile and had all these different pictures, and I was like, this would be a great way to ask her to marry me. Now, there were a lot of pictures, and I had to figure out, like, what's the order? How do I want to do this? And what I found was I spent a whole bunch of time thinking about which pictures, which of the pages look like. And then each page, you can kind of see it up in the corner here. There's a little bit of text over here. But each page had pictures and then text. Some had smaller text, and others had a whole page of it. It just varied from page to page to page, and so it just took a lot of time, a lot of energy. But what I found myself was, at night, I'd be working on it. I'd go to bed, and I'd be thinking, like, oh, you know what? I think if I just switch those pictures around, that would work better. I think I should be saying this. I'd fall asleep. I'd wake up the next morning, like, oh, man, I've got a few minutes. Let me go ahead and dive in, and I'd start making some other edits to it. And then I get in the car to go to a meeting. As I'm in the car driving, I'm thinking about, like, oh, man, yeah, I really like the idea how that page turned out, but I think if I went ahead and switched these few words around and moved these pages around, it's going to work better. I continually was on my mind over and over and over. I was devoted to this project. And that's what he's asking us to do. And I think this is the cool part. In 3:1 and 2, again, we looked at that, the heart and the mind last week. Like, that's the vision. This is what it looks like. This is the image. We're looking to Christ. That's the image. We're united to him. This is the image. We're being transformed into his image. And then in 4:2, where we're being devoted, continually devoted to prayer, which is incredibly dependent, this is where the strength comes in. So the one gives us the vision, like, that's where I want to go. And through prayer, with awareness and thanksgiving, that's what releases these things. That brings it into reality. And when you think about an aware, like, you're just aware. Every moment is an opportunity for me to image God. I'm aware of that. And so I pray in an awared manner. When I'm entering into a conversation, I'm coming into a meeting, I'm leaving a meeting, I'm wondering, I'm asking these questions. God, how can I image you in this situation? Having a dialogue. My mind is like, how can I do this? And then as I'm coming in there, as I'm pondering, as I'm praying about this, I also turn to my prayer like, God, thank you. Thank you. You've already given me what is needed to image you here. You've already given me your spirit. Everything needed for life and godliness has already been given to me. And so just help me to be wise with the words that I say. Help me be wise with the actions that I have. I want to image you in this meeting. Amen. I enter into the meeting, have the meeting. And as I leave, God, man, was I imaging you? Even in the middle of the meeting, somebody will ask me a question. As I ponder, I sit there, I'm like, okay, I want to image him well. How do I answer in a way that is accurate and correct, that's truthful and encouraging? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's constant dialogue. But it's not me mustering up strength. It's showing this great dependence. I'm aware that I need his dependence. I'm aware that he's given me everything needed for life and godliness. So it's, God, help me be aware. And then as I'm aware, God, thank you that you've given me everything I need to image you in this situation. Do you know that? Every situation that you are in, he has given you what you need to image him well. which what that means is, let's just say you're in a relationship and you're crossing all sorts of physical boundaries, and you're like, there's just no way I can get out. But the reality is there's a door, and he has 2 legs that have been given, and you can get up, and you can walk away, even when the hormones are going. There's no like magical force holding you there, telling you must continue down this destructive path. Not at all. As you're aware, am I imaging you well in this situation? Nope. Well, God, I'm aware of that. Now I need a way. Oh, thank you. Where are you going? I'm not imaging. I have to win Wimbledon. I have to go. Like this is it. This is match point. I'm leaving. And as you do, if you listen, you'll hear, yeah, that's it. You're living as you're designed. You're sitting there and somebody has just said something so offensive to you. And all you want to do is just deck them in the face. You're like, I'm just so tired of this. God, how do I image you in the middle of this? You're like, oh, a little bit what's aggravating you is because there's some truth in what this person just said. Oh. And you actually need to apologize. Oh. There's no magical force that closes your mouth that doesn't let you say, I'm sorry, or you're right, I'm wrong. Will you forgive me? The only magical force is your pride that says this, I want my own fruit. I don't care what God thinks is right or wrong. I care what is comfortable for me. And prayer that's where the power comes from. And I think this is really beautiful about prayer too. Do you remember, we mentioned it earlier tonight even, that prayer that Paul prayed, which was so beautiful. He said, I'm praying all these things for you. Remember, we all walked the diagram, like, well, that's amazing. That's so cool. It's so encouraging. Paul prayed this beautiful prayer for him. And then Paul says, would you pray for me? He invites them into the same position that he was to them. He doesn't say, I'm good, I don't need any prayer. He says, no, I would love it if you'd be praying for me. It's incredible. Prayer is an incredible part of walking well with Jesus. Well, he also talks about the world here. He goes on, we read these verses here. Conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders. And it's interesting, so you want to make, because the rest of the time it hasn't been outsiders, but here's a shift. So we know that he's talking about people who don't know Jesus yet. So you want to conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity, and let your speech always be with grace as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. You ever just go back and read that verse, let your speech always be with grace as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how to respond, how you should respond to each person. Start controlling your language and in your mouth and other areas, and begin to watch how wisdom flows out in every situation. You'll just kind of know what to say because you have this dependent attitude of, I don't know what to say. God, I'm aware. I want to image you well. I don't know what it is, but thank you for giving me everything I need. What would you have me say? It's the truth. I don't want to say the truth because the truth might be offensive. Well, speak the truth. Well, yes, I did see you steal, and yes, I am going to have to go ahead and report you. You know, friend of mine. Actually, there's no better friend that I could be, because to stay silent would allow you to continue to do the same destructive thing over and over again, and you're made for so much more than that. You'll know what to say and how to say it. And it's cool because Paul has just asked them to pray. Pray for me as I go into the world to tell them about Jesus. And then he says, I want you to go tell the world about Jesus. He's involving us in the same activity. It's much like this. When we were in Central Asia, we had this great opportunity to build these straws. And it was one of the hardest times that I've laughed in the last probably year. But while we were there, I think Shelby was initially, no, it might have been, I don't know if it was Rebecca. Somebody was there initially just saying, here's the straw. Then you have these little snot stickum things that you put on there. And then you put the nice little cactus or whatever else that you're going to put on the straw so it's festive. And so we had to assemble these things. And the person who was teaching didn't say, okay, just watch me do it. And we all just sat and watched. No, it's mine to do. No, we said, come on, everybody. Whoever, you come, you help. Come, you help. Marcus, you come help too. And it was just a joy to sit there and see all of us beginning to work. And Paul is saying the same thing. Reaching the world for Christ is not just his job. He's saying it's yours too. He's inviting you into it. And we all had our unique different styles of how we went about it, but we all ended up with these straws that had the little festive things that were on there. But it's so cool. Paul is saying, oh, well, you're not quite there. Maybe you can help me witness next year. He's like, no, right now, get to it. Pray for me. And as I'm praying for you, and let's just see Jesus change the world in us and through us. Community, and then we're going to wrap it up. He starts talking about from 4:7 through the end If you notice, he mentions a total of 12 people in the church of Laodicea. And these are all people that are invested with Paul, that he knows. There's a community around. You want to know how I'm doing? Ask these guys. Oh, you want to know how I'm doing? Ask Onesimus. Ask him because he's the second guy mentioned. Ask him. He's awesome. I love him. He'll tell you, he knows me so well, he can speak about my circumstances. Paul has people after people after people after people that he is involved with and that are involved with him, that he's sharing ministry with. This is not a Lone Ranger gig. If you think that following Jesus is your own thing on your own time and like everybody else just do your thing, that's just not it. We're all in this together. Paul's all about that. So should we be. We don't just sit there and read our Bible in isolation and that's it. We begin to talk and dialogue with each other. We begin to reach out the world around us. And we're like, I'm terrified. I don't know how to reach the world around us. Come talk to me. I can direct you to an individual or two or three who are very passionate and very skilled, and they can help you figure out how to direct conversations to a spiritual nature and how to present the gospel. We have people all over the place that do that, but he's inviting you and there's a community to go about doing it. So we talked about family, prayer, world, community. I told you those last ones were going to be fast. The challenge is simply this, to intentionally, to really think about one relational area and begin to look at that as this is an opportunity for me to simply live as I'm designed. This is my Wimbledon moment. Every moment of this relationship, whether it's I go to work and I'm an employee and my boss is not always very fair, but you know what? I am called to serve well. I'm designed to serve well. And so you're intentionally thinking, not just I have to go do this, but you're intentionally thinking, because of Jesus, because I have been changed, because this brings him great honor, I will intentionally invest and behave in this relationship in a way that will honor him. I challenge you, think of just one area where that's going to unfold in your life, where you're going to sit there and say, okay, from now on, I'm not looking at this as necessarily like they're above me or below me. I'm looking at this, how do I bring you honor? How do I image you well in this? And then share with somebody in the community factor. Let them know, man, I really want to begin to see how I interact with Aaron. I'm really going to do that. Or how I really begin to parent, whatever it may be, how I really begin to interact with other staff members. Whatever that is, when you intentionally sit and think about that, share it with somebody so they can hold you a little bit accountable. And then continue to memorize just Colossians 3, 1 through 2. Let's go ahead and pray.